Speaking of faith, I saw Joe Theismann at the national championship game, and I'll tell you this about Marcus Freeman. I am a psychotic fan of his. I love the guy. Now, Big Sills doesn't really, I had Terry Hanratty give me a little bit of zizzers a couple times, because he told me he was 2-0 versus Miami, and I told him I was 2-0 versus Miami. We gave him their worst beatdown, 57-7. Era was barely mad at us, whatever. But Hanratty gave me a ton of crap, and there was always that Miami Catholics and convicts, and then I saw Marcus Freeman. I'm like, I cannot not root for this guy. I cannot, and I think he's got Notre Dame heading in the right direction. And who would have thought that Chip Kelly, this is an upgrade. Let's bring in the former Notre Dame Fighting Irish and NFL Most Valuable Player, our dear friend Joe Theismann. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
How'd you like that, man? I mean, do you feel the same way I do about Marcus?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just, I've had the good fortune to spend a fair amount of time with him with every trip out to Notre Dame, and to be able to sit and visit with him, talk philosophies and talk about culture, which I think is very important. And that's sort of the word that everybody talks about now, is what kind of culture is being created. And I think he's done a fabulous job with those young men at the University of Notre Dame. And, take into consideration, Sam Hartman was the quarterback a year ago. Riley Leonard's the quarterback this year. Somebody could be Steve Evanelli, could be the quarterback next year. Our defense was fantastic. Al Golden was incredible. Mike Denbrook did a terrific job, I think, with our offense and, handling the running game. And Marcus did a fabulous job with him bouncing back after we lost to Northern Illinois. I mean, you have to get guys to believe. That's the whole thing. You touched on it, Dan, and you mentioned some great names. The whole thing was, conceptually, does it make sense to the player? Don't kid yourself. If players don't like it, they're not going to put the effort in. You think they will, but they'll give you 90%. You can get by on 90%, but you're not going to get 100 because they just don't believe. Marcus had everybody believing. Joe Gibbs, when we played for him, everybody believed. You see this with Dan Quinn and his staff. The guys believe in Washington. You see it in Kansas City. You see it in Buffalo. You see it in Philadelphia. Guys believe. And that's the bottom line. And that's what Marcus has been able to do. I think he did a fabulous job. And so proud the university rewarded him with the extension. And I'm thrilled that he'll be there. People have asked about professional football for him. Not right now, maybe someday down the road.
Would this be fair to say, and when I grew up, I grew up in an Italian family, and we all rooted for Notre Dame when we were younger and all that. They're in Connecticut. So, it was all about, the Irish and the Subway New Yorkers that were all Irish fans. And I'll ask you, don't you think it's tougher today to coach at Notre Dame than it was even during Era's time because of NIL, because of back in the day, the 85 roster scholarships? That kind of made the parity across the board. And I'm not saying who's a better coach here. I'm saying, you think it's tougher now, especially with your admissions requirements. I say this all the time about Notre Dame, Joe. When Alabama recruits 20 kids, they're getting 20 kids in the building. When Notre Dame recruits 20 kids, admissions is going to look at that and go, I think you're going to get 10 of those guys in here because it's a high standard.
Not necessarily, Danny. It is a high standard. Absolutely. I really feel like, the young men that play at the University of Notre Dame want to be Notre Dame players. It's interesting. When you watch a college football game, so often you hear somebody say that, well, this guy came from that university and this one came from that university. But you don't really ever, when you listen to all college games, you don't ever hear somebody say, well, this person transferred out from Notre Dame or went into the portal from Notre Dame, which I think speaks volumes for us being able to bring the players in that will be a part of that team and then also keep them. I think today, being a college coach, and this is one of my dear friends, Bill Belichick, jumped into the fire. I scratch my head and think with everything that's going on and the constant changing of the rosters, it's a major challenge right now to be able to go out and keep players. How much money can you pay them?
Yeah.
It's a mess right now, but unless the NCAA gets a handle on this thing, it's even going to become worse, because what's going to happen, Dan, is the universities that have deep, deep pockets are going to go pay the players to come there and play. Whether they're good or not, they're going to take it away from the other universities that would have an opportunity to compete, except that they can't compete economically. College football today is not as much about the players competing as it is about the pocketbooks of the university. Used to be the pocketbooks of the alumni. Now it's the pocketbooks of the university. And I think it's just not healthy for the sport, and it's not healthy for college football.
Absolutely. Everybody's becoming SMU now, back in the day here. So let me get into Washington here.
No comment.
Right on. Hey, you've got to be surprised where the Washington Commanders are right now. I mean, come on, Joe. I mean,
Yeah.
NFC Championship game. I mean, I know Adam Peters has done a great job. The environment has been changed. There's an excitement now again in DC. I mean, but you have to be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, to sit here and say that we expected, if you're a Washington Commander fan and you said, well, I knew in the beginning of the year they were going to play in the NFC Championship game, get out of Dodge. I mean, this was a football team that really had so many new parts to it, Dan. I mean, new head coach, new staff. Basically, almost every member of the staff is new. New front office, new players, all the players that came in that were brought in. I looked at the roster at the beginning of the year at the first game. I think 60 or 65% of the starting 22 had never put on a Commander uniform before. Guys like Bobby Wagner, and you've got different guys in different positions that really had just sort of grown and come together. It's a great locker room. These guys care about one another. When I had the chance to broadcast, and I traveled to different cities, and I'm not like every announcer has the opportunity today to actually meet with the other team, but I would walk around in a locker room, and I would be able to find out and sense whether this team liked one another. You feel the energy, you listen to the conversations, you look at the bonding that's being done, and you say to yourself, this team has a chance to be good. And then I'd walk in other places where there'd be sort of a group of guys one place, a group of guys another place. Guys would sort of go out on the field, really hardly ever say anything to one another. Those places existed, and I thought, man, that's a tough environment to have success in. You don't have to love everybody. It isn't a love fest. But everybody respects the job that they do. And then on top of that, which I think is the most important part of it, is they hold each other accountable. Not only in a game, you're held accountable in practice to go as hard as you can to make me better. And I always think of Darryl Green in this regard. Darryl was so quick. His quickness was incredible. Obviously a Hall of Famer, got his jersey retired this year. Every accolade that he earned, he deserved. But I used to have to be on time and on rhythm if I wanted to beat him with my throws. And so he actually made me a better football player because he worked so hard at being a better football player himself.
I think one of the advantages that you had, along with the Niners, that a lot of people don't get when you didn't have free agency, when you got Darryl Green there and you got the receivers that you had, and you had John Riggins, and you had the linebacking core, when you're going against great players every day in practice, your Sundays are easy.
Well,
because you're playing against great players all the time. And like I say about this kid Quinyon Mitchell that the Eagles have, I say this, when you're lining up against A.J. Brown, and he's stopping to school you and teach you what he's trying to do on a free release or an inside release, there's no doubt that is a schooling that you're not going to get from just a coach sitting there drawing it up. Hey, I want you to do it this way. When you have players like that in the locker room, and Beathard is putting those players out there, I mean, and you have the coaching staff that you guys had with Joe Bugle and the O-line, plus Joe calling the plays, that's the culture you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's exactly what you're talking about. Players willing to help one another. And even those, the starters willing to help those behind them. One of my favorite movies is Mel Gibson's We Were Soldiers. And in that line, he basically says, I want you to teach the man in front of you. I want you to teach the man behind you your job.
Yeah.
And I want him to teach the man behind him your job so that everybody's ready to go. This, the saying is next man up. And that's what a lot of teams have had. We've been very lucky. We've lost some players, but we've had some come back. Lattimore's back, which I think is a big help for us in the secondary. Bobby seems like his ankle's not that bad. And Frankie Louvu is just phenomenal. I mean, they're just everywhere you look, you've got players making plays on this football team. Receivers that nobody really has thought a lot about, guys that have come from other places and stepped up. De'Ami Brown's had a great playoff run. Terry McLaurin is just being Terry. And, I get sideways a little bit when they don't talk about Terry in the same breath as some of the other great receivers in this game. CeeDee Lamb, and, Jefferson. And, to me, he's just as good as any of them.
Wow.
He has a great catch radius. Terry, if the ball's near Terry, he's going to get it. He's going to catch it. He's going to keep it. And that's something special about him. And that's the other thing too, Dan, if you look at this run by the Commanders, they've done a great job of hanging on to the football. It reminds me a year ago of the Kansas City Chiefs. They're in the year, I think, they got to like the last 2-3 games of the season and they dropped like 35 passes. Patrick actually had a really good year, be it for the fact that the guys kept dropping the ball on him.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they got towards the latter part of the season, then into the playoffs. They caught everything. And it made a difference. And that's really where your passing attack comes from, is guys being able to make plays. And I'd put Jaden Daniels' ability to throw the ball down the field up against anybody in the NFL. I don't care who you want to put out there. Drew Brees was a great thrower. Russell Wilson has had the ability to throw the quote-unquote balloon ball. But Jaden's just he's special. I'm running out of superlatives to be able to describe him. And all I can really think of is he's a very, very special individual. He's a very unique quarterback. And, we're so glad we have him as a part of our football team.
How about this, Joe? Vic Fangio said this yesterday about him. He goes, the only thing that doesn't add up is his birth certificate. He goes, because Vic was like this. He goes, this guy here, man, he sits back in that pocket and he is so calm there, and he's always looking downfield. He's just got an intangible. And I've told you this before. I had Herm Edwards on with me, and he told me he's just, his journey. And Joe, you and I have talked about that. His journey, his growth and everything. Is there one thing, though, for you that has really stuck out with him where you just went, man, the best is yet to come with him? Because like you said, you can make an argument right now. Top 10? Hell, I'm looking at top 5 the way he's
I am
playing
too.
right now.
I'm saying right now, top 5. I absolutely no question. I think his composure is the one thing that jumps out. And having the ability to run is a blessing and a curse, because the ability to run, if you have to, is a blessing. But then also when you're asked to operate out of a pocket, and a little space opens up somewhere, how do you control that temptation not to take off? It's 3rd and 5, and all of a sudden I get a little spray, but I get a little daylight. But then I've got an in route coming in at 15 or 12 that looks like it's going to be open. What do? Jaden, he's made the right decisions. He's hung in the pocket with it collapsing around him, and he just gets the ball out of his hands. His release is quick. His accuracy is excellent, and that's a big thing. What I look for in college quarterbacks is how quickly do you get the ball out of your hand and how accurate are you with it? Those are the things that matter. Seems to be always on balance when it comes to throwing the ball. You and I could say, I could run 10 things off that you need to do as a quarterback, and he checks every box. His
feet just look so good back there too. The way he's not a glider, he gets back. And all the things, a quarterback to me is in his feet. Everyone looks at the arm, and I'm not saying arm strength is not important, because
it's
I get it, but man, you got to have great feet. And he's got sensational feet. And that leads me to Cliff Kingsbury here. The impact that he has had on the passing game. Brian Johnson too, the former OC with the Eagles, is there with him as his quarterback coach too. Those two guys The impact that those two guys had on him was what this year?
Tremendous, tremendous. The way Cliff calls a game, and I said this right in the beginning, he gives him a chance to get comfortable into the game. You know, we used to do this. We used to throw hitches, 5-yard hitches or a quick slant. That's what Joe called for me, to give me a chance to sort of get comfortable, run a little play action, dump the ball off, get yourself your first completion, and sort of get settled on into the game. I think that's what Cliff has done. And he's been, you know, you cannot look at Jaden and not think about the quarterback coach, the coordinator, and him. You know, it's the three of them together to work through the things that you have to grow into this game, to be able to recognize the complexity of defenses on the other side of the ball. Now, that can be helped out through formation. You know, and Cliff does a great job of using the formation to be able to give Jaden an opportunity to make the reads that are necessary for him to get the ball out of his hands. Now, that's an integral part of what you want to do in a passing attack. And now they're running sort of a sugar huddle, which for those that don't know what it is, they really don't formally huddle like in a little circle. They just sort of gather around one another, or the receivers don't even come in, and they just, you know, they do this or make little signs, and the guys know exactly what they're supposed to do. One other also, the offensive line, not getting talked about. I think they've done a terrific job. And of course, Brian Robinson sort of had a coming out party against the Detroit Lions last week. So, you know, if that continues, but hey, we can talk about a lot of different things. This game boils down to one simple thing. Can the Commanders, with their run defense, which hasn't ranked very high, can they control Saquon? Period. The first game, I think he had 148 yards rushing. The second game, he had 150. This is the third time on the merry-go-round, and you certainly don't want to see that happen again. He's a phenomenal player. I had a chance to play in a golf tournament with him a couple years ago, and he was going through all the free agency stuff. And, you know, he didn't want a lot of money to stay in New York. Wouldn't have cost him an arm and a leg. They gave Daniel Jones a lot of money because Saquon Barkley was in the backfield with him. So, you know, that one worked out well for Daniel. But I think Saquon he's driven now. He's absolutely a driven man. Athletically, physically, got it all. Smart, absolutely. But then all of a sudden you put that drive in, like Jaden, you put that drive into that individual, and maybe step aside because, you know, you're going to have a handful to deal with.
Absolutely. Here, a couple more here for you here, Joe. I got this here too, that, you know, I had a chance to go down to Isle Morada to be with my former coach, Jimmy Johnson, and Belichick was there. And I asked him a question about how he and Tom would go back and forth and play war games, almost like the old battleship game. They're sitting there. What do you do on -20? Yep. 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, all this. And you're going out and you're playing it in your mind situationally on what you're going to do with those circumstances. As you know, no game plan is always going to go verbatim here, no matter what you think it is. And I'm wondering how that also works with Dan Quinn. Here's a guy that's got 3 NFC. Here's the guy that's got 3 conference championship rings with a defensive mind, either what he did up in Seattle when he was the coordinator up there with Gus Bradley,
right,
and now what he's doing with this group, who last year didn't look as good as it does now, and they've gotten better. I wonder his impact on Jaden Daniels, what you might see with an offense, say, with Kellen Moore, because I would think he's one of the better coordinators. He got a Super Bowl ring in Seattle being a defensive coordinator. He's one of the better guys. How much does that play into it?
I think his calm, it carries over to the football team. His willingness to go for it on 4th down is the trust of his football team. And the guys know that Dan has their back. You know that term player coach?
Yeah.
You know, we've all dealt with that, Danny. It's not a guy who succumbs to the wishes of the players. It's a coach that sets a standard. He says, this is the way we're going to do things. We're going to hold each other accountable to this standard. And then he doesn't waver from it. He doesn't waffle and, oh, well, let's make an exception for this individual. Or let's make an exception for that individual. No, this is the standard under which you're going to be a commander, period. And then you have the veterans come in to help you, you know, carry that through. But I really feel like I really believe that Dan's just done a fabulous job. And Dan's not going to go out and call plays for Cliff. I mean, he's going to make a decision on fourth down whether to go for it or not. But they've rehearsed this enough. It's funny. I think about practices for the Commanders now. We used to get into when we were there, right? You get through 3rd and 1. That's really as far as the numbers went for you in your head. We had fourth down plays, but it would be one of the 3rd and 1s. Now all of a sudden around the league, whether it was Dan Campbell or Dan Quinn, it doesn't matter where you're looking. Andy does the same thing. And we've seen Andy do it a number of times in Kansas City. Up in Buffalo, they're doing the same thing. In Philadelphia, fourth down has become almost the most important down in football. Used to be first down, get yourself a chance to get to manageable yardage. Now it's like, hey, fourth down, we've got to convert. And the coaches aren't shy. They'll do it on their own 35.
I know.
That's trusting your defense. If you do that, Marcus Freeman did it in the national championship game, and Notre Dame stopped them. And so once you start to stop them as a defense, it builds momentum. And then once you convert it as an offense, it's like, okay, let's keep this drive going.
Let me correct. I want you to correct me on this if I'm making more of this, Joe. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles, we're based in Philly, as you know, here, and we covered the Eagles here. And so in the playoffs, Jalen Hurts has averaged 92 net yards passing. This year, the offensive passing attack was 30th, albeit there's no doubt an iconic 2,000-yard rushing attack. However, Detroit runs the ball and throws it. Baltimore ran the ball and throws it. When you look at Hurts, they're asking him only to throw the ball about 18 to 19 times a game. They theoretically have taken the game out of his hands, and they want him to play more high percentage when it comes to slants. They haven't had in the last 7 games, Joe, a completion of 35 yards or more. Is the passing game bad in Philly, or have they just adjusted because of what Barkley has brought? They're 16-3. I know. I sound like I'm complaining about, they might have the best roster of all 4 teams remaining. I know. I sound ignorant here, but help me out on this. They can't. A.J. Brown has 22 yards in 2 games in this postseason.
Oh, I know. But he had a lot of catches. He had 8 in one game and 5 in the other one when they played Washington the last time. He would be a guy that you have to concern yourself with. I would be interested to see if Marshawn has him all over the place.
I think he will. By the way, Joe, one of the reasons why I think you're going to get a better Latimer came off the IR because he hadn't played in a bit, and I thought maybe conditioning played a factor. He's played now for about a month and a half. I think you're going to get a better Lattimore in this game on Sunday.
Yeah, and he's been tempered. Mike Evans was no picnic either when you think about it. But to answer your question, I think the offense has morphed into let's run the football and we'll throw when we have to. It was sort of the way I had to play the game. I had John Riggins. We were going to run the football. We were going to run, and we were going to run play action. Now, we didn't work out of the gun like the guys do today, but Jalen's, there's more pressure on you as a quarterback when you're throwing the ball 16, 17, 18 times a game than when you're throwing it 30, 35 times a game, because the time you're being asked to make a throw, when you throw it less, it has to deliver. The onus is on you to complete the ball to keep the drive alive so that we can go back into our rhythm. Listen, wide receivers, they're the debutantes of our game. Okay. They're the ones that, if they're not getting, they're complaining. I'm not getting enough targets. I'm not getting enough catches. And that's just the nature of the animal. I think in Philadelphia, and AJ's made it very clear that, he wants to be a bigger part of it. Devontae the same way, want to be a bigger part of it, but you got a terrific tight end. There's only one football. Okay. And this is, a lot of guys don't understand that. I can call a play, and if somebody double covers you, you're not going to get the ball. And if they do that the whole game, you're never going to get the ball. And I'm not going to call a play to force it to try and get you the ball. To me, I've always, being the quarterback, I'd love to get everybody involved. What I used to insist on, and sometimes I even audibilize to it, is Art Monk was never a problem. Never a problem. But sometimes if you stand out there away from everybody and you don't get a ball in the first quarter and you don't get a ball midway through the second quarter, they're like right fielders in baseball. They're just not going to hit it my way. And then all of a sudden the ball comes to you and you're like, oh, wow, you're a little surprised and it's not as smooth as you'd like it. I used to love to try and get Art involved within the first 2 series for sure. Get his hands on the ball. Get him lathered up a little bit. Let him get hit a little bit. And with Virgil and Alva, it was the same way. Let's give him a chance to really get into the flow of the game. And Charlie, I think what Philadelphia has done is they have become a team that knows that they have to run the football if they want to be successful. They believe in their defense. They believe that they're that good to be able to stop people. And then they'll pick their spots where they want to throw. That's who they are. Now, the Eagle fans, I don't really think they care. They want to win a football game. I know it, hey, listen, I played in Philadelphia. I know what that's like. That is not an easy place to go. And I guarantee you, as a player, when you're not winning, it's not an easy place to be. But I think that offense has developed into one. And Kellen's one of those guys that loves to run the football anyway, to a degree. If he had his druthers and had the players, you'd want to be able to run the football and control it. Like I said, I feel very similar to the way Jalen feels when it comes to the way I played in Washington with John. With John and Joe Washington, I had 2 guys that could run the ball all the time.
Did you have to buy into that? I mean, listen,
all that mattered to me was winning. Hey, I didn't care.
But not everybody thinks like that, Joe.
Well, then if they don't want to think about winning, then they aren't gonna. Let's put it that way, okay? If you think that it's all about you, you're kidding yourself. If you think you have to be the star, you're kidding yourself. And I would say this to any wide receiver out there. Maybe you're not catching the ball, but if you blocked your rear end off, you could make that one block on a safety. You could make that one block on a corner to give that running back to score a touchdown, and you win a world championship. It changes your life. You didn't catch the ball, but boy, you made it happen so that somebody else could get in the end zone. To me, that's going to be that's what matters, is what can all right, I'm not catching it. Hey, there's so many other elements. Come off the ball hard, make them think that you're going to get the ball. It takes the defender out of the play so that somebody else could make a play. Maybe the other guy catches the ball and he's headed your way and you're running hard and you got that corner's back turned. He turns it up and all of a sudden you get a big play. That to me is what the position's all about. That to me is what's significant when it comes to wanting to win football games, because the bottom line here is to win. That's it. There's oh, well, you played a great game. No, Notre Dame lost the national championship. We came back, we fought hard, but you still didn't win. I've never been a 2 guy. I've never been comfortable being number 2. And whether it was in competition or whether it was part of a team, I think if you put the helmet on and you're going to go out and play, you give it everything you got, and you help that guy in the uniform that you're on, that he's wearing, you help him be as great as he can be. And so to me, and wide receiver, nobody thinks about this, but they're downfield blocking. Jaden went down the field, the first touchdown last week for Philadelphia against the Rams. Some terrific blocking on the outside by the wide receivers allowed that to happen. Think about it. They made the play. He got the yardage, he got the touchdown, but they made the play. And that's what we have in Washington. You got a scrappy bunch of guys who are willing to do whatever they need to do to get in somebody's way so that somebody else can pick up some yards.
So I just learned something about my dear friend Joe Theismann. He don't wear that NFC Championship game anywhere.
Well, I fortunately I have a Super Bowl ring to offset it, Dan.
I know you do. So I'm guaranteed you probably haven't seen the NFC Championship ring in quite some time. The only one that comes out is the Super Bowl ring, right?
No, really. I wear both of them in my presentations because real quick, I'll hold one up and say, this is the NFC Championship ring. This is what happens when you think you're really good and you're not as good as you think you are. And I hold up the World Championship ring. I said, this is what happens when you're a part of a football team that just believes. Yeah. So, I use them as examples, but I asked, who was it? I asked Boomer Esiason once. I said, this is many years ago. I said, Boomer, you ever wear your AFC Championship ring? He said, heck no. We lost. But I want to wear that ring because you know why? People will look at the ring and they're spectacular. I mean, if anybody listening out there, you want to see what these Super Bowl rings look like. The latest ones are like watches. I mean, they're that big.
I know,
but
they're enormous.
People will ask you if you just have an AFC Championship ring. They'll ask you what it's for, and you have to say, well, for losing a Super Bowl, and you just don't want to do that. You just don't want to do it.
Oh my God, a guy with a Super Bowl ring and a national championship ring. That's pretty damn good there, Joe. I got to tell you, pretty good stuff there. Hey, it's always great catching up with you, man. It should be an exciting NFC championship game on Sunday.
They're both going to be great.
Who wins it?
Who wins? I think Washington can win it all.
The whole thing.
I think they can win it all. I think I would, it would be interesting if Washington and Buffalo would play. I think it would go back to 91. I think it would go back to from a Super Bowl standpoint.
Yeah. I think that's Doug Williams in the San Diego, and that's the Super Bowl.
No, that was against Denver. That's
Mark against Denver. Yeah,
Mark Rippon in Minnesota.
That's right. That's
right.
But
I think all four of these football teams are really, really good ball clubs. But I'm not just saying Washington. It could be a year of destiny for this football team. It really could, because you just look at the way they've played. You look at the games. Look at the last Philly game. I mean, it's amazing what happens. A kick here, a play here, a block kick here, a return kickoff. I mean, you think of the poor Ravens. I mean, the ball hits the ground. You don't get a chance to win the football game. You never know how the ball is going to bounce. That's why it's so funny in its shape. But I'm a believer in the Washington Commanders.
Boy, I'll tell you what, and with the fact that they're potentially moving back to the old land site of RFK, that'd be going back in there. I tell people all the time, if you ever want to really check your equilibrium out, you had to go and play a game at RFK when that thing was going like this, and you thought you were on a seesaw going.
You were bouncing up and down all over the place. Yeah.
Is there something wrong with my eyes? Why is the field moving? No, it's the stadium moving. You're like, what? The thing was like on shock absorbers going like that. You looked around, you're like, holy cow. That's great. The excitement's back. Joe, we got to run. Thank you so much, my friend.
You're welcome, buddy.
For your time, and Notre Dame is heading in the right place. And so are the Washington Commanders. I hope they get the helmet back. That would be great with the tribe and everybody working that thing there. So I hope that comes back as well. Joe, thank you, my friend.
You're welcome, Dan. Take care.
You got it. Our good friend, Joe Theismann. And boy, that's going to be a heck of a championship game on Sunday, to say the least. Guys, do me a favor. I can't thank you guys enough. That was absolutely awesome. We appreciate Joe Theismann for doing this for us. All right, guys. Thank you again. Please hit the like button. On top of that, don't forget tomorrow, 2 to 6 Eastern time. We're getting closer to the championship, and we'll see you on this flip side.